like to welcome you to this video on simplified scanning. In this video, we will demonstrate how to set the baseline of your scanner and share with you some very important principles that will assist you in getting much better scans as we move along in this training. So let's get started. So before we get into the actual demonstration of scanning, just to cover a couple areas of concern. Before you get a scan or do a scan on someone else or yourself, it's very important that you get yourself well hydrated. So you want to drink enough fluids or water the day before. You don't have to overdo it, but the more hydrated you are, the better the scan results will be, since scanning is based on galvanic response and hydration is very important in skin conductivity response. So if your skin's too dry, we don't get as good a baseline, good results, and as much sensitivity on our scan. So that's a very important thing to understand. The other things to be concerned about is not taking things like Vicodin, which will deaden the central nervous system, or being on antihistamines, which will virtually dry up the skin. So those are the kind of the principles of scanning that you want to be looking at before we get started here. So as I mentioned before, we're going to focus on setting the baseline. So your scanner will be hooked up as we see here. It's all plugged in, it's all turned on and ready to go. Now, before we even do a scan, one of the things that we're really recommending is that people stay relaxed as well. And it's very important that you're not doing a lot of gesturing like I am here right now, or a lot of movement. While you're scanning, you should be having conversations. All of these things can affect the central nervous system. So basically, when we're scanning, we're looking at central nervous system stresses. Now, that can be internal, that can be emotional, or external stresses. So we try to eliminate the emotional stresses and the external stresses, like are caused by my hand gestures, in order to just confine it to the internal stresses that will be generated by our scanning program here that we will soon be running. All right, now this here is something new. It's called Rescanning, and this will help us to relax during scanning. You don't have to have this, but this can be a real help. So we place this into our DVD player on our computer. In this case, I've got it preloaded back here. And before we start our scan, we simply click play button here, and this will start some very relaxing music to keep me relaxed, keep my emotions so they're not stressed while I begin the scan. This time we'd like to talk about the GRS hand control. If you're right-handed, we'd like you to place it comfortably in the left hand. Do not white knuckle it, do not overgrip it. Just leave it comfortably in the hand with the palm and the fingers touching the metal strips. If the grip should change a little bit during the session, don't worry about it, because we're going to address that as part of our setting of the baseline, which will adjust to this little bit of change that you may experience in how tight you're gripping the hand control. But here again, keep yourself relaxed with your grip. Do not add any artificial creams or moisture to the hands. The hand should be clean but not stripped of all natural oils for the best scans. Next, we'd like to talk to you about bulb placement during your scans. This is very important, as it will affect the sensitivity of your scans and the results you achieve. Now, on our past DVD training, we had you place the bulb in direct contact with the skin under the shirt in the stomach area. But in the last few months, we've been doing scans a little bit differently. We've been having our clients place this bulb directly in the shirt, behind the neck, in a comfortable place around the shoulder blades. So this is where you want to place it. Make sure it's comfortable so that you don't have any extra stresses or discomfort during the scans. But this is a general area that we want to place our bulb at this time for more advanced scanning. This time we want to focus on how to set the baseline of your scanner. Program should be running. The hand control will be gripped. And when it is gripped, you'll probably hear an audible tone. With the program running, we want to set the baseline, so we'll actually dial the scanner down till we just have a red light with no tone at all. We are now set for maximum sensitivity. For some individuals, this light may pulse. For others, it may not be quite as bright. It depends on the skin conductivity of the individual being scanned. But it is very important that this red light be lit during the scan with no audible tone for maximum sensitivity. If you cannot get the red light to light, chances are you are not well enough hydrated. Our scanner has picked up a hit. If you look at the status on your software, on your computer screen, next to the word running, you'll actually see an asterisk appear. This indicates this hit is being recorded as a database and as a program. At this time, we want to turn the baseline control counterclockwise till we no longer have an audible tone. Notice here again, the red light is still on, and we're now ready for our next hit. We simply need to relax and wait for things to happen. If during the scan, this red light should go out and dim, we'll want to come in, reset the baseline, so that once again we have a red light with no audible tone. This keeps the baseline set to maximum sensitivity to adjust for changes in our central nervous system during the scans. At times you may hear a growl or a chirp during the scan. This indicates a hit, although not a very strong one. We'll reset the baseline. These hits are still recorded to the database and to the program that is being written. At other times you will hear an alternating chime. This indicates a much stronger hit. If this happens, you may want to push the button on the GRS hand control till you get a green light. If you're still hearing an audible tone as we are here, this indicates a very, very strong hit. If you do not hear an audible tone, it is still a strong hit. And of course, these hits are still being recorded. At this time, we'll turn off the green light. We'll go back to our scanner, and we will reset the baseline to wait for our next hit. If the baseline is sensitive, you may want to set it by just taking the top of the finger and very slightly adjusting your baseline control. Sensitivity will vary from person to person. Now let's move on to accessing our database and the GRS HITS program that has been written for us. When the program is finished, we can click our mouse on the DB HITS tab. Once we click on this tab, it will give us a list of possible pathogens or conditions that the scanner picked up. This is a tool for research and should not be considered a diagnostic tool. Just because things appear on this list does not necessarily mean that you have these conditions at all. This list is simply for research. To access your program, you click File, GRS HITS, and your program is displayed. It is very important at this time that you save the program. So we're going to click File, Save As, and we're going to name the file and save. This has saved your hits. If you want to save the database that was generated from the DB HITS tab, you simply highlight everything in the box, right-click your mouse, choose Copy. At that point, you need to open up a word processor. In this case, I'm opening up Microsoft Office. right-click on the screen, choose Paste, and here we have displayed our database. Now we can click File and choose Save As and save this list as our database of hits. This concludes our video on scanning. Hopefully this has helped you understand how to scan in a very simple way and how to set your baseline. So we thank you for your kind attention, and we hope to see you soon. The GRS scanner, just to talk a little bit about this so that you understand, and we'll be retouching on this a little bit more about the database, because that's the biggest question we continuously get. When you're running a scan, it will actually generate a database of hits. So let me see if I can demonstrate this right now, because I want to do this anyway. Let's see if we can escape out of here. And I'm going to go in and try to open my own program here. Let's get out of this one. And we'll get out of this one for now. And I'm going to close that one down. We're going to open this up here. And hopefully I can get back to that program. There we go. So we're going to go into the GRS scan programs. This is where you would start if you were going to do scanning. And so let's find those right here. And my favorite scan for a starting point, I get this question all the time, is called Parasite and Pathogens. That's my favorite. So I'm going to open that one up. It's only 20 minutes long, but if you're not sure where to start, I like Parasite and Pathogens. That's a good program we like to start with. Okay, so we're going to pretend we're doing a scan. The program's running. And what it will do, you'll see the dwell here in this program, it says 10. And that dwell stands for 10 seconds. So it's 10 seconds per frequency. So we're dwelling on the frequency we're scanning with just long enough to create a disturbance, but not long enough probably to kill anything. Okay, so I'm just trying to get a read on your body's central nervous system, its response. Because what the scanner does, it scans the best scanner ever built, and that's called the central nervous system. So if there's something devitalized, something going on inside your body, the central nervous system will create what's called a galvanic response, which you can measure as a rise of conductivity on the skin. It's so effective, the police use it. In fact, if you opened up my scanner, one of the boards says lie detector. The cops will tell you it's 93% effective in measuring stresses, but they're measuring a different stress. It's an emotional stress. So the central nervous system, it measures emotional stresses, internal stresses, and external stresses. And external stress would be like if I slapped you across the head. And that would also create an emotional stress. So that can be measured. And internal stress could be something as simple as the gallbladder emptying into the stomach. And there will be a small galvanic response. Or an infection. That's why you'll feel the clammy hands on people that have a chronic infection. Or you can feel a rise in the forehead, the heat that's generated, see? This can happen in as little as 0.6 of a second. And so we're generating internal stresses. That's the science behind what we're doing here. Because we'll drive our bulb into the body, we'll be running this program, and then there's a handheld unit, or some of you may have something like this, where you place your hand on something like this, and it virtually measures the change in conductivity here. That's what it does. See? So that's how that works. Okay, now, while the program's running, let me pull this over here, it'll be a little bit better here. I'm going to simulate hits by clicking this memorize button, because we can actually force these in. And you'll notice when a hit occurs, let's say we had a hit at 846 cycles, we'll generate this readout in the DB Hits tab right here. Here's your tab I clicked on. And then if there's another hit, let's hit that again, boom, another list comes up. So then as time goes on, we'll hit this again. Got to wait the 10 seconds. There we go. So here we have all these things on this list. Does that mean that you have all these things or the person you're being scanned has? No, it doesn't mean that at all. These are the conditions in the rife world that frequency is used against. That's where the database comes from. Doesn't mean that you therefore have herpes type 2A, streptococcus pneumonia, or Lyme disease. Doesn't mean you have that. You may not. It's just like law enforcement. You asked him a question, said he lied. Does that mean that he robbed the bank? You need other evidence to prove that, even though that's on your list based on that question. See? So the question is, does he have an alibi? Where was he at 10:30 in the morning when the bank was held up? Does it look like him in the picture, the guy holding the gun? Has he made any recent deposits? Does the vehicle that left the crime scene match what he has? See, there's all these questions of corroborating evidence to demonstrate that when he lied, it was truly a lie. It said he lied, but there's a 7% chance he didn't lie at all. He may have had an internal stress happen when they asked him that question, or he may just be exceptionally nervous. There's people like that. Now, at the same time, when you look at this list, is there evidence that you see any symptoms that match these things on the list? If Lyme disease was to keep showing up here, do they have the symptoms of Lyme disease? Have they ever been tested for Lyme disease to see if they test positive or negative for it? See, do they have the symptoms? Is there other evidence? Sometimes you'll see things on this list that clearly have nothing to do with that person. For example, it may say prostate problems, and you're scanning a woman. You know, she's born with, I've had them ask me, was I born with a prostate? Maybe there's something weird about me. No, it's just what that's used against in the rife world. You know, you may see distemper show up, right? Well, that's something a dog has. Now, I've asked them, whenever I see that on the list, do you own any pets? And every time I've asked, they always do. But if you're carrying distemper, it doesn't have any effect on you because your body basically suppresses it. But in an animal, it has a whole different effect. But I had a friend of mine, he used to joke with her, how's your distemper doing? You know, because it showed up on the list. But that's not something you'd see. Mange could show up on the list. There's all kinds of things because in the rife world, that's what it's used against. Now, I do look for redundancy. So if this list is developed, I had a fella in, he had a rash on his head. Couldn't figure out what it was, nobody could. Ran a scan on him. And ringworm kept showing up on that list. Other things was there too. But I did research on ringworm. It matched exactly what we were looking at here. It's a fungal infection. It's not a worm, actually, even though it's called that. So we ran the scan, and I ran the entire ringworm program, and it disappeared.
How many times did you run it?
Oh, I probably ran it just 2 or 3 times in this case. But here again, this is for research purposes. I tell people it's like an MRI. Have you ever seen one of those? I've had 3, 4, 5 of those done. And when I had serious back problems, needed surgery, the guy read my MRI. He says, there's nothing wrong here. Well, I knew there was something wrong. He said, no, there's nothing here. So I told the doc, you're sending me up to a surgeon. Gracias, up in Grand Rapids. He says, well, there's nothing wrong here. I says, you're working for me. You make me an appointment. So I get up there, and he says, Mike, take off your shoe, because I told him what was hurting. And he grabs my big toe. He says, fight me. There's nothing there. I didn't know that. It's an L4, L5 nerve impingement. That's the symptom. So he's got a symptom, right? There's something wrong. And then the other foot's fine. So he looks at the MRI, right? The other guy says, nothing wrong. He goes to L4, L5. He says, oh, it's right here. So you see how he's matching things he can physically measure with what is on the MRI. You've got to make a match to make this thing work. So that'll help you grasp what's going on.
When you have a hit, do you have to hit memorize each time to get the program that you want to run, or does it just happen out of?
It's automatic. You don't have to click memorize each time. Yeah. But having said that, let's say you're running just a general program on somebody, and about 60% are frequency sensitive, and they'll tell you, wow, I'm getting some feelings here. There's something going on. You can click that memorize button, no scanner connected, and it'll start generating a database on that person. So you can use that function there to memorize whatever it was that they were getting an experience with. So you don't have to open up your manual. You can pull it right here. So you can do that right there. Now I want to show you one other thing. When the scan is done, and this is where people make their mistake, they think this is the program. This is not the program here. This is the database. The program is up here, File. Then you go down to GRS Hits, and you'll see it's right there. That program is the exact frequency that was run, the exact duty or the square wave on time that was used, and the exact pulse rate that was used at the very moment that that measurement was taken. And you'll notice this thing's writing fractional frequencies. You see these? They're not whole numbers anymore. And that can be a game changer when you scan people. Those little fractions can be the difference between getting something fixed and not fixed. Because every resonant frequency isn't always a whole number. Some of them are running in fractions. And when we scan people, the scan automatically has a little drift to see if they hit on any of those little fractions. So that's called the fuzz command. But it fuzzes around the primary to see what else we might pick up. How are we doing on time, Dan?
20 minutes.
Okay.
So
all right.
memorize that, then how do you set up?
Now, once this is in here, this program's ready to run.
Oh.
So virtually, it's there.
How do you label it?
And that's what we want to go to next. How do we label it? File, Save As, and then you name it. I like to stay in the GRS Scan Programs folder. That's where I got the original program from when I name it. So that, I'll just throw something in here, and then we'll click Save, and it's in there. It's saved. But I like to save into that folder, then I can find things easier. Question?
If I understand correctly, you would parse the data first before you started to run the program, or would you just automatically use the frequencies that came on? In other words, you said you want to verify that the hits actually had something to do with it.
Right, yes, because notice now this is gone. I clicked run on that, so you lost what you had here. So you do want to check that database first.
And you may have to throw some things out. In other words, if you have this template.
Right, you're right, but the frequency's good. You tested positive for that regardless. So even though the database may not be accurate for what their symptoms are, that frequency they tested positive for. So to give you an example, they just took a study on a dollar bill. How many critters are on it? When we pass these around, and I think it said it was over 100. So they hand it to the laboratory, and how many of that 100 pathogens could they identify? 20%. 80% of them, they don't even know what they are. They just know they're alive. They're living microorganisms or critters. They may be able to tell by their structure if they're bacterial or viral. But other than that, they don't even have a name for it. So virtually, sometimes what this is picking up is something that's not on anybody's list. See, they haven't mapped all the diseases, just the most common ones that they're aware of. And so it's a good question. So don't throw anything out here. This is what's most important, is what it wrote here. No matter what it says here, you had a response to that, and you should run that. How often should you run it? I'd run it at least a month. That's what I would do. Okay, question? it automatically adjusts the time to 3 minutes per frequency. Because it starts out at 10 seconds on the scan, but once it writes it to the program, it creates a 3-minute per frequency timing, and I wouldn't touch that. I'd leave it alone. It's good to go. Question?
Is that say all these, the list you had of all the possibilities that might be down there, is that something you can elaborate on, say in other programs, say, well, for instance, Lyme disease, you can go into your Lyme program?
Yeah, if you want to know more about, let's say what's on that list, sometimes this will work. It's a good question. I'm going to go over here, and let's say Lyme showed up. Something that, let's say we're not familiar with what Lyme is. So I go to the Lyme program, Lyme and Rocky Mountain. I open it up, and here's a button called Links. And I depress that button. Now this doesn't have the fastest internet speed, but what this will do when you click on links, it will actually take you to more information on that condition. So whenever you update your frequency sets, it will do this for you. Now here, Rife Machines and Lyme disease. That's the video. And right now, you know, it's not going to play it on this little computer, but it would play it at home. Okay? So that answer your question as far as how to find more information on that particular condition. That's how you do that. Question?
How many times a month? You said to run it a month. Would you do that weekly or daily?
Yeah. If you own a system, obviously I would run it daily. But if you're a practitioner, bring them in once a week or twice a week to run that program. If they're showing obvious symptoms of an infection, sometimes I will give them True Silver to take home with them. Now maybe you have something else as a practitioner that you're using to help fight an infection, but I send them home with some True Silver to sustain them till their next visit. Okay, Kate?
How many times can you run that scanner program, like once a week, to see if it's...
So you want to wait 30 days to rescan. That's an important point. The reason for that is the central nervous system can stay elevated for up to a month for some people after a scan. Now you can run a different scan and look for things, but if you rerun that same scan twice in a row, it's not likely you'll pick up the same responses. And the best analogy I can use for that, we go back to the police department. So he asks a question, did you rob the bank? He says, no. And the lie detector's off scale. Says he's lying. Then he asks him, did you rob the bank? He says, no. And it's still up here. It isn't moving. It's still elevated, but it's not, because see, his central nervous system will stay there. It isn't like it's going to jump again and again. It's already elevated. This is why they reset the baseline like we do on our scanners when they're doing lie detection. But he's setting it to the new elevation of that man's stress levels. And likewise, when you run a massive scan on somebody, and I did this, I ran scan after scan after scan on a fellow. He came up to see me from Florida. He come back day 2, I couldn't pull nothing. He was flat. And the reason I couldn't pull anything is his central nervous system was so elevated. Remember, we're trying to get another elevation here. Couldn't find it. Couldn't find anything. Because I couldn't push him any higher than he already was. So he was already so stressed, I couldn't get another read on him. Kate?
Okay, so if you're scanning somebody, how long a scan out of the scanning folders, or time-wise, can you scan somebody?
I know one doctor that scans for 3 to 4 hours. He'll run one scan, another one, but he's doing it all within the same compartmental moment in that first visit, as opposed to trying to bring them in the next day and the next day. Because like I said, for many people you won't get a read that way. Question?
Is there a case, because I've run 2 patients where there's nothing, and one just recovering from Hep C,
Right.
and another one has confirmed above, and nothing.
Right.
So how does that work?
The reason that can happen, there's about 3 reasons. First thing, though, I ask them, are you on any Vicodin or antihistamines or any opiates? Some of them are, and that dampens or deadens central nervous system response or will dry the skin. Secondly, depending on the disease condition, there's two things can happen. In advanced stage of Lyme, they can have a damaged central nervous system, or if they've been through chemotherapy, at least on the short term, there's a damage to the central nervous system. You can't get much reads on most of those people, if anything at all. And the third reason is, and this is the least likely, but it can happen, is they can be so infected that everything's already so elevated you can't get another read on them. Their body's already engaged in such a war with whatever they have, which is really a good thing in some ways because it's dialing in on it, that you can't get a read. So that's why I say scanners, you've got to know their limitations. They're not perfect. They're not perfect. But this can be used instead of the hand control. And they would place their hand simply right here. The nice thing about this is we're not dealing with a change of grip where you have to keep adjusting the baseline of your scanner constantly. You know, it just lays here. And it's a little more sensitive. You have a bigger baseline to work with. The purpose of the blue lighting, it doesn't have to be on, but blue lighting is also known to relax people. We want people emotionally relaxed during their scans. Now what some people do, they'll actually play, this is a brain entrainment CD called Relax and Escape during long scans. If they feel they have a person that's very anxious, they'll use this and pop this in, and this will just tone them down.